Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Game-Based Learning in the World Language Classroom. The why, the what, and the how. We're on section 3 of my book, The How. I'm giving you solid games here and why they work. I'm Madame Sensei. I teach Spanish, French, and Japanese to high schoolers out here in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. And if you want to help me work on some games, I'm at studio-nemo.com, Minecraft Education Ambassadors, or the Minecraft Teachers Lounge, Duolingo Educators Network, of course, here, comment at YouTube. And we are on chapter 12 of my book. We're talking about card games now that are going to help you teach vocabulary that needs to be drilled and killed. We have to drill and kill in language classes. The students need that contact with the language, and they need repetition, and they also need repetition. So in our previous episode, we were talking about dice games, and now we're moving on to card games. This one I'm surprised I have to talk about. I'm just really stunned how much my students love playing Go Fish. They adore Go Fish. I did it on a lark one year. I could see that a lesson was going south and my students still needed to practice their food words. And I was like, what can I do? Oh, I know. And I just ran over to the other side of the room and I grabbed a deck of cards that I was saving for something else. And I actually grabbed, because I had copied it, fortunately, many times so that students could work in partners. So I had enough for large groups. And I took two of the decks and put them together, and then I had to separate them out again. That was really funny. But they were food cards, and I was like, what game can I play with food cards? I've got 10 minutes. The students need practice. Go Fish. That has to do with food, right? Because at least they're talking about fish. Okay, so I plopped it on the tables, and my gosh, they loved it so much. I did not expect that I had students that had never played Go Fish before, and I had to explain the rules. And at the end of a unit, I always give the students a little test, and they get all worried that they have a test. And they come in and they sit down, and I plop the paper on their table, and the paper is actually a test for me. It's what games did you like? What games helped you learn the words? What should we do next year with my next class? How should we tweak the rules? That kind of stuff, okay? And they just loved Go Fish. So now every time we're doing food, we're doing Go Fish, definitely. And other times it's like, we need to work on these words. Let's do Go Fish, okay? So here's the deal. This game is absolutely great for a bunch of nouns that you want to teach. So you have several possibilities for what you do for the cards. You could make half the deck pictures and the other half corresponding words, and then use it in a memory game. You could make the entire deck pictures. You just print it twice, or, twice as many times as decks that you need. What I wind up doing is I make the entire deck pictures with the target language underneath the pictures, okay? Especially if I'm just in the early stages of teaching the vocabulary. Then the students have that word right underneath the picture. They have that reinforcement. The picture is like the scaffolding for them. And then they can read the word, and then they're practicing pronouncing the word. Now, I hear you saying, but Madame Sensei, you teach 3 classes. That means you have to go to 3 times as much work. Yeah, I think it's worth it, okay? And then later on, I can substitute for a deck with no words. But certainly when I start out, I have the words on it. I'll show you an example in a moment. Go Fish works best with 2 to 6 players. So depending on how long you want the game to last, deal 5 or 7 cards to each player. Okay? Longer games, 7 cards. Quicker games, 5 cards. Put all the extra cards face down in the messy pile in the middle. And this took me a while to convince the students, even the ones who thought they knew how to play Go Fish. This is the fish pond. It's got to be totally random, messy, so that as you draw a card, you can draw from anywhere. It doesn't have to be the top card. But it's a fish pond, okay? So you want at least 20 cards. My decks generally wind up about 60 cards. That is to say they're 30 cards printed twice, okay? So I print on light colored cardstock. I do not have a color copier. I'm a poor teacher. Don't have any money. My copier is a black and white copier. The work copier in the staff lounge is black and white. So I try really hard to choose pictures that I think are going to photocopy well, and that usually winds up being free clip art. So photographs sometimes they're just too heavy on the ink and the students can't figure out what they say. But, you're gonna make it into the workroom and the last color they have left is orange and you've got to print all your copies on orange. What's going to look good on there, So I try to use light colored cardstock, but obviously there are times when I go in and there's nothing left but dark or weird colors or whatever. Post the sentence frames. I always post the sentence frames, and I usually give the students a cheat sheet that they can have in their hand and make notes on. Okay, so your sentence frames are going to be: do you have, I don't have, and go fish. Okay? Here's an example of sentence frames for Spanish class. Just that's what's on the board. And also I added, it's your turn, it's my turn. I win, I have more cards. Too bad. Here you go. Don't lie to me. That kind of thing. Students are pretty good. They don't lie to each other. Okay. So the first time through, the very first time your students are learning to play the game, just say, hey, it's your turn, ask the whole table. Say, do you have an apple? Okay. And anybody who has it has to fess up. The second time through, when they're more comfortable with the game, then you can say, okay, ask the person on your right, or you can say, ask anyone you want. You have to name them and ask them specifically if they have. And then if they get the match, then they put the cards face up in front of them so that everyone can be jealous about how many cards they got. If they don't have a match, if they ask, do you have an apple, and nobody at the table has an apple, everybody will say, go fish, and then they have to pull a card out of the fish pond. Okay, so that player will take a random card from the fish pond in the middle of the table, and remember, these are all spread out, so it's totally random. Okay, if they randomly draw the card, they make the match and they get another turn. Okay, probably though they don't manage to draw the card, but this person over here overheard, oh, you've got an apple. Okay, and they didn't ask me specifically. They asked Bob if he had an apple, but I have an apple. So by the time it gets down to this person's turn, then they're going to say, hey, Ethel, do you have an apple? And of course, the goal is to get the most matches. And the goal is actually to speak in the target language, right? This game I find really good for when you have a long list of nouns that you want your students to learn quickly. Students are pronouncing them, they're hearing them, if you've written the words on the bottom like I have here, they're reading the words over and over in a very short amount of time, and they won't recognize that they're actually being drilled and killed. You can save the same deck of cards. I told you that when I first started this, I used a deck of cards intended for a different game, but you can save it for a $20,000 pyramid, Loteria, any memory matching game, Teams Games Tournament, which I talked about in another video, and I'm just going to add that video to this playlist because I also talk about it in my book. Any board game where you need an extra deck of cards, I'll talk about that coming up too. You've got your cards, you've already gone to the hard work of printing them, now they're there whenever you need to grab them.
Du poulet. Do I have to grab it?
No.
Ben doing it. It's Jenna doing it.
All right. I kept this one short. In our next episode, we're going to talk about more card games to teach vocabulary that need to be drilled and killed. And I promise I'm keeping an eye on the time from now on. Thanks for joining me. Hope to see you next time.